Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Rigoberto Herrera Hybrid Wash Processed Colombia from Sweet Bloom Coffee. And there's the bag right there. And Sweet Bloom Coffee based out of Lakewood, Colorado, and they feature quite regularly on this channel. No need to discuss them too much, but what exactly is this coffee that we have here? Well, they list it as a hybrid wash process method. So I'm going to read directly from their Instagram page and let you know what that means. They say this specific lot was processed using a hybrid washed method, which essentially means the ripe fruit is first soaked in cherry for 22 hours before removing the skin. It is then fermented for another 35 hours to remove the fruit mucilage layer before being mechanically dried. And as somebody that's been a fan of Sweet Bloom since its inception, this is a first-of-a-kind coffee for them. They don't experiment as much as a lot of other roasters do. They have some lactic processed here and there, but this is the first of this kind of processing method that they've had. This was also the first of their higher-end coffees of the year, as this one was $40 for a 6-ounce bag, which I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe is the most expensive coffee that Sweet Bloom has ever offered. As somebody that has purchased a lot of their higher-end products, they might have had some things 4 ounces that may have been around the same price or even a little more. But we were very curious about this coffee. Got a lot of requests, a lot of people asking if we were going to be trying this coffee, and the answer was an obvious yes. We were pretty curious, given how much we love Sweet Bloom. This right here is day 17 of this coffee. And let's get the recipe out of the way, of course. So definitely brewed at our standard recipe, 16.67 to 1 water to coffee ratio at 204 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, as we've mentioned in previous videos, Sweet Bloom has a recipe listed on their website of 200 degrees at 16.67 to 1. This was brewed through the Chemex. We liked it at the higher temperatures, typically do with Sweet Bloom's coffees, even if they do suggest a lower temperature. And this is a light medium American for the roast profile. With that out of the way, let's start discussing this coffee. And day 6 was our first experience, and it was probably a little early. That typically tends to be the case with Sweet Bloom coffees. But this was actually an exception because we were pretty surprised at how lively the coffee was on day 6. Neither the grounds nor bloom yielded a super wild aroma, but the coffee did pack a very strong flavor. Dynamic flavor, in fact, what we describe as dark candy, perhaps something like a maple and caramel with a fruit undertone, transitioned into a rock candy, and that was pretty common. There was the Brandywine coffee that had listed rock candy. This is rock candy, all right? It just tasted like rock candy. Before it finished off into a pretty purple dominant cup of coffee. Very positive first impression. We were actually really happy with it on its first try. Day 7, quite interesting as a coffee. Definitely started off as a lovely candy-like beginning, and then there were some purple jasmine components that were a little more prominent in this day. Oddly enough, it makes way for some very fresh fruit component with a delicate finish. Yeah, there was a lot in the cup. The first 2 days, quite a bit in the cup. Day 8, surprisingly clean and flavorful yet toned down. The coffee draws a near perfect line between going overboard while still providing bold and wild flavor. Jasmine, the most prominent on this day, pretty purple forward coffee and some fun candy complexity. And we'll stop right there to use this opportunity to discuss something. There's the Panama Lita natural processed anaerobic coffee from Onyx that we reviewed last year, and that coffee was just super purple dominant, and that was an example of maybe the coffee going over the line. Like, it was so strong, so over the top, and this is a perfect opportunity to discuss this one, as this one stopped right at that point. It is a super bold, wild, and flavorful cup, but it doesn't reach the point of overbearing. It gets close, but right as it gets to that point, it kind of yields, it kind of cuts off, and that's something we were really, really impressed by with this specific coffee. Day 10. There's so many flavors still in this cup of coffee. It started off as jasmine forward, settles quickly, rock candy, even got some sweet milk tea, melon fruits, slight caramel, slight cereal, so much in this cup of coffee. Day 11, just pretty consistent jasmine notes, stops just before it gets too strong, just leaves you with the right amount. You can definitely see Grape Jolly Rancher, as there is, that makes a lot of sense considering that we had this rock candy and this super purple taste. Would never describe it personally as a Grape Jolly Rancher, but rock candy, super purple, makes sense if you have it listed as a purple or Grape Jolly Rancher. I actually feel like we're missing a day here, but regardless, the best way we kind of describe this coffee by the end is it is super purple forward. It's not as purple forward today, but one thing that it kept reminding me of specifically was a like honeydew milk tea. So if you were to go grab yourself some like boba honeydew milk tea, that's exactly what it tastes like. It's this green kind of milk tea sweet flavor that's really, really impressive. Really, really like this cup of coffee. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. I actually had a pretty long discussion with somebody as to where the melon fruits should go on the tasting wheel, but couldn't decide on anywhere. Because if that was the case, they would have probably been a level 4. But here's the way the tasting wheel looks. Sweetness at level 5, florals at level 5, berry fruit, and that's specifically probably noting the grape, at a level 4. Citrus fruit level 3, pretty clean cup of coffee, pretty lasting finish, not too much else in this cup of coffee. Pretty nicely rounded tasting wheel. Typically when we have our favorite coffees of ours, they skew pretty strong in certain directions, and that's why this tasting wheel looks exactly the way it does, because it's skewed in certain directions, and some flavors were really dominant and terrific, and we were a huge fan of them. All right, so our thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I mean, we've been raving about it this entire video, and it must be said, actually surprisingly like this cup of coffee more than we liked the Fabio Leo Garcia from Manhattan. So it's not quite the Lady Bermudez, which is one of the most amazing coffees we've had in many years, but this one right here is our favorite sweet bloom coffee we've had in probably since the Panama Volcanica from several years ago. This was a tremendous cup of coffee. It's our second favorite cup of coffee of the year. Really, really impressive. Didn't know if Sweet Bloom was going to do something so spectacular with a experimental, different, unique processing method, but they really, really knocked it out of the park. We can't emphasize that enough, that this coffee was a terrific done coffee. And that's nice considering we didn't love the Juan Peña, we didn't love the Familia Ambachi. Those coffees were slightly below our expectations, and Sweet Bloom really hitting the mark with one of their higher end offerings just kind of does reinforce how much we love and how high of a standard we hold Sweet Bloom to relative to a lot of other coffee roasters. Type of person we would suggest this coffee to, it is really unfortunate that this coffee was only around for 2 weeks and it's no longer on their website, because we think a lot of people should try this. But if you love super purple forward tastes, as well as you love some sweetness in coffee, something unique, complex, a lot in it, this is a perfect cup of coffee. The purples were great, the melon was great. The way they have this coffee described on here, it doesn't do it justice, because there's even more depth and more complexity to the notes that they have listed. So really impressed, really enjoyable. Love this cup of coffee. Going to finish the last few drops of what we have here. Just kind of enjoy it. But we're going to leave it at that. If you were lucky enough to try this cup of coffee, we'd love to know your thoughts and opinions of it specifically, as yeah, this one was a real gem, honestly, in our minds. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And this right here has been a review of the Rigoberto Herrera Hybrid Wash Processed Colombia from Sweet Bloom. Thank you for watching.